Hey everybody, there's a really cool thing happening and it's called BYOP, Bring Your Own Pencil. Now, if you've already caught Dr. Steve Finn's most recent BYOP for Mining Colony Duel, you will be delighted by the upcoming Butterfly Garden Duel. That's what I'm going to show you today. It is for 1 to 2 players and yep, it's a bring your own pencil situation. I've got all 3 sheets of paper needed to play Butterfly Garden Duel. There is a circle player and a square player, and there's a park right here in the center that both players are going to capture butterflies in. Now, the great thing about this game is just how easy it is to jump into. There are going to be 8 rounds, and you just randomly, every time you play, write 1 through 8 at the top of this area, 1 in each of those boxes. And each round, you're going to go numerically, and they're going to offer different numbers of butterfly, different initiative orders, and different locations on the map. Now, players are going to fold their sheets in half so that their opponent is not allowed to see what's going on in the bottom part of their board. And right there on the top of it, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and then the end of the game. There's also this really handy distribution chart that tells you exactly how many butterflies of each particular type there are on the map and in the game, which I find incredibly helpful. So the first thing players do is just determine the order. They look at their numbers that are down here in these circled or squared spaces at the bottom of their player sheet. And circle player has 18, 19, and 21 available, while player square has 17, 20, and 22. Now, why does this matter? Well, at the end of the game, players are going to add up the remaining 3 numbers in these boxes, and the lowest cumulative sum is going to earn 3 victory points. So you want to play your high numbers, but if you play your higher numbers, you may not get initiative order in selecting what you want for the round. So phase 1 says determine which 2 options are in play for the current round, and you just take a look at where is your number 1, and you just look at that particular space and you say, oh, well, there's a 5 initiative number, which is really low, and that's good. 16, a lot higher, but you also get way more butterflies and way more choice of where they go on the player board that everyone's sharing. This is that map. You take a look at which options are in play, everyone scopes it out, because then you're going to determine turn order. And that means that you're going to secretly circle one of your initiative numbers at the bottom. So you circle a number, and yes, there are no duplicate numbers. So that means that no one is going to pick the same number. Someone's going to be higher and someone's going to be lower. Now take a look at phase 3. This is when players take their turns, which they will do in turn order based on that lower number selection. So the step A says choose an option. Second player has no choice, they get what is remaining. Step B, enter a new time number and cross out the old used one. Simply write in the number of the column you chose and mark through the one you circled. Super easy. Step C, take a jar. Now you're going to look at the area that you have appointed to you. So let's say I took 16 and I look at C and E. I look at C and I look at E, and I have the option of selecting the 4-jar yellow butterfly, the 4-jar green butterfly, the 4-jar red, the 2 red, or the 3 black. And once I take it, I put an X through it, and that means I can't take this jar again, and neither can my opponent. They do not have access to that particular jar. I take that, and I simply circle the jar in my space. Now I have all of the jars available to me, but I'm not going to be able to get all the jars. There are only 8 rounds, and there might be a round where all the jars in the space that you have selected is not available. So I will take a jar. Next, I'm going to capture butterflies, and that's when you get to take the butterflies from the area in which you are allotted, so still C and E. Let's say I took this 2 red down here. I could put my X through that, circle it over here, and now in both areas C and E, I'm allowed to take 3 butterflies, and I would probably want to take the red butterflies. So I'll take 1 red and another red, and what you do is you simply circle those areas on your board and you simply want to fill up your jars with the matching butterflies. If you fill up a jar, you earn the victory points that's in that green seal that's up in the top right corner. If you're not able to fill a jar, that means you're not going to earn those victory points. Now, if you have an extra butterfly that doesn't fit in a jar because your jars are filled or because you don't have a jar of that type, you put them in your net. And every player has access to 2 of each butterfly types in their net. And they would simply circle that butterfly, but when they get a jar that matches that particular type in a later round, they simply cross off that butterfly and put them in the matching jar that they just collected. When they select their butterflies on the space, they either, if they're a square player, make a square around it, or if they're the circle player, they place a circle around it. And that's how you know on the main player park map who essentially captured which butterflies, because you're going to start making networks, because networks is one way that you actually gain victory points at the end of the game. And that is step E. Connect paths, if possible. So you want to start capturing butterflies that are adjacent to other butterflies, even if they cross over through the hedge grove into a different region. If you can see that pathway, you can connect it. And any connected network, so they don't have to be all a continuous line, they simply need to be connected all together, touching one other butterfly of your type. That's going to count at the end of the game for your largest group of butterflies that are all connected in some way. Step F says score the area if all the butterflies are caught. So let's take a look at this B zone. There are 5 butterflies in B. If all of these butterflies have been captured by either player, both players, that means that that area is finished. It's complete and you will score. The player will score the difference in butterflies if they have the majority. So let's say that square player had squared 4 of the butterflies and circle player had circled 1. 4 minus 1, 3 points. So 3 points in B goes to square player, and you just simply put over here next to the B, 3. And so that means that player is going to score 3 points at the end of the game. The cool thing about this is you only get to score the areas that complete. You can have a whole bunch of butterflies, and let's say over here in A, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 butterflies. But if that is not filled up by the end of the game, if those are not all captured, you don't get to score that area, even though you might have a whole bunch of butterflies that you captured there. So, the game will end after 8 rounds, and you are going to score the following. Really easy to track on your board. You're going to look first at how many completed jars of butterflies you have, scoring that seal, the green symbol with the number in it, for victory points. And you add that total for number 1. In the second space, you are going to, again, look at who has the lowest total number in that space. That's what that arrow green down means. And that player gets 3 points. The other player doesn't get anything. So put a 0 there if you had a higher total number of all 3 remaining numbers. The third thing you score is the networks. You are going to look at all of those networked, connected, adjacent butterflies in your largest group. So square player will say, well, I got this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, that one, and those are all connected. What is that? 8 points, and you're going to write in 8 points right there. There might be other connections elsewhere, but nothing exceeds the 8. And then lastly, you'll take a look at how many points you scored for the regions that finished in the game. So that 3 points, it's the 4 minus 1, I'll put the B, and if I score any others for square player, I will also put those numbers there, and I simply just add 1, 2, 3, and 4 together, and that's my total. Just so you can take a look at what a marked up version of this looks like, this is the game I played with Lewis, and you can see right here in the circle player sheet, every time you get a jar, you just circle the jar. That means you have access to it. You can fill it with that particular type and number of butterflies. So this was circled here along with this one. and along the way. So here, this one wasn't scored. That's why there's an X through it. So while the jar was available, only one of those green butterflies filled it, which means that it wasn't completed. So that 5 victory points in the corner was not earned. Meanwhile, here, filled up with that monarch butterfly. Same here, not this one. Definitely got that one. Over here, the green. And then again with that, no yellow butterflies were used to fill up that jar, even though they had access to it. And all the scoring is listed here. You'll see in the player park area, all of the jars were taken. They all have X's through them. And you'll see the difference in the squares and the circles that we see here. So this was the square players network, which was pretty big. What did they get? 11 points versus circle players 6 points for their network that was over here. And that's how you count those networks, and that's how important those are. This area was completed, and this area was completed. So those are the 2 scores over here on square because the difference was 3 and 6. And so they were able to score 9 points. Meanwhile, over here, circle player didn't score any points for those areas, despite having a really strong lead and majority in some of these bottom and left park areas. However, they did have a total of 17 points and got the 3 victory points for having the lowest initiative score remaining, and square player had 32 points. So they weren't as concerned about that initiative and earning those 3 points as circle player was. So I hope that helped clarify that scoring and what these sheets look like when you mark them up. This is a really fun game. It's an engaging game. I really loved the choices. I loved the way you capture butterflies, make networks, and score mid-game for regions completed. The blind bidding, essentially the blind selection of initiative, really makes this game pop. And I love the way that I'm never anticipating my opponent in the way that I think, but I do find that it's just thoroughly engaging, and I like that kind of player turn order being different potentially every single time you play. There's also the solo variant for this, in which you play against an opponent that has a really fascinating flip that reminds me a lot of the Little Flower Shop solo variant, because you essentially are flipping over cards and you have to make a decision every time a new card is flipped over. So in the solo game, you have 7 rounds, maybe fewer, depending on if it ends early and you lose the game against your foe opponent. But you will flip a card over and it will have a selection of the location and the butterflies collected. And you can say, I'll take this, or you give it to your opponent and you take the second card. But you don't know what that second card is. You just know what that first card is. And you know, do I really want this, or am I going to press it and take the second card, in which the opponent takes that first card if you choose to pass, and you must take the second card. It is really fascinating and very dynamic. Considering you are just playing by yourself. Ultimately, I'm a huge fan of these print and plays, as Dr. Steve Finn calls them, BYOPs, bring your own pencil, because there's absolutely game here. And it reminds me of some of the games recently that I have really enjoyed, like Voyages. I have already covered in contact paper all 4 of my Voyages maps. I also have covered my Mining Colony Duel, and we put up visors instead of folding the paper in half. And so it just makes the game super replayable, particularly if you've got your dry erase markers. It's bring your own dry erase marker instead of bring your own pencil in my case, just because I want the longevity of printing and keeping a really nice color copy of these BYOPs from Dr. Steve Finn. I'm really loving Butterfly Garden. I think there's something super dynamic and engaging with this game, and it plays pretty fast. I love the style of it, and I think this is going to be one that comes out again and again, and is a game that I can play with new players who might not be aware that these kinds of games exist.